This is our individual episode with Noam Weissman.
The Executive Vice President of Open Door Media, and the host of Unpacking Israeli History, the #1 Jewish podcast in the world.
Hope you enjoy.
So about Judaism and Zionism in general, because we've been talking a lot about how they interact and where they separate. Do you think that Judaism is inherently linked to Zionism? Or is there like some sort of divide between the two?
It's an interesting question because of the way you phrased it. Inherently linked. Well, there was not a political movement called Zionism until the 19th century, which is important to note that was led as a political movement by people who were not necessarily religious and often were anti-religious, actually. And they said, we have to do something fascinating. We have to, in many ways, create a new Jew, which was really interesting. We were going to create a new Jew, a Jew that was no longer going to be submissive, a Jew that was no longer going to be at the whims of, in some ways, God, you might say, in some ways, the local government and Gentiles. And we're going to create a new situation where the new Jew is going to be able to chart a new destiny. So in some ways, when you look at the history of early Zionism, you could say it's an offshoot. But that is a misunderstanding, an incomplete understanding of what Zionism is in fundamental ways. Zionism has become the expression of a healthy Jewish identity. A healthy Jewish identity is an identity that combines a few different aspects: Jewish faith, Jewish peoplehood, Jewish land. All three are connected to each other. All three are connected. So what Zionism is able to do, and what it's always done, and there are multiple different strands of Zionism. Let's make sure that everyone who's listening remembers that not every Zionist looks the same. Not every feature of Zionism is the same. Not every aspect of Judaism is the same. You have Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews. You have conservative Jews. You have Sephardic Jews. You have modern Orthodox Jews. You have Reformed Jews. Okay, it's a lot of different things. But broadly speaking, Judaism is the acknowledgement that there is one God, and this one God has given the Jewish people a specific destiny in this world, a destiny that will always be connected to the land of Israel, a destiny that will always make sure and ask and demand that the Jewish people will be there to make the world a better place, what people call tikkun olam, that the Jewish people have a set of commandments to follow as part of this religion, and that the Jewish people are a people who have both a common fate and a common destiny. The common fate, as we all know, is the common fate that we see forged in the fires of places like Auschwitz, and 3,000 years ago, places like Egypt. And it has a common destiny. The destiny is a place like Sinai, where it is in tradition described as there was a great revelation. The Jewish people have this set of principles to behave and to do and to think and to act. So that's what's going on here. Zionism and Judaism are intertwined with each other. A healthy Jewish identity is a Jewish identity that has a Jewish soul and the body. And when you separate the soul from that body, there is lack of clarity. And what happened for almost 2,000 years is the Jewish people lacked this healthy identity. They didn't know what it looked like to form a government. They didn't know what it looked like to have garbage men. They didn't know what it was to be a majority, to have power. But the Jewish people have always been meant to be able to forge their identity and to say, this is what it looks like not to be at the whims of other peoples, of other groups, but to be able to say, this is what it's going to look like. What does Jewish music mean? What does it mean to play sports in a Jewish way? What does it mean to have a society Jewishly, to incorporate other minorities into your experience? So for a long time, the Jewish people, I would say, had phenomenal things about them, but were sickly because it didn't have the connection to that land. It always had the connection to that land, but it was able to manifest itself and to live in that land, to live as part of history and to forge that identity. And so I think that Judaism and Zionism are inherently linked. Of course, there are Jewish people who do not identify as Zionists, and there are Zionists who do not identify as Jewish. Let's remember, probably there are more Christian Zionists in the world than there are Jewish Zionists in the world, right?
Yeah.
So let's
That's probably the same
understand
number
all of these
of
definitions, but what does it mean to be a Zionist? To be a Zionist means, and I have to go in a few minutes, gents, but to be a Zionist means to believe and to act out the national liberation of the Jewish people. That's what it means. It does not mean you have to agree with every Israeli policy. It does not mean you have to agree with the Israeli government. It doesn't mean you have to agree in any specific aspect other than making sure that the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland and a right to dignity. Like any other peoples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something to keep in mind, because I think like so many times when you go into individual policies, you could say you're not a Zionist, but it's a political movement. It's not like a political party, but to keep it like in perspective, it's almost like being Republican doesn't mean that you support every Republican, every shade of Republicanism, and every Republican policy. It means you support the Republican agenda.
Stephen, I want to clarify something.
I want to
clarify something. You're only talking about political Zionism. There's labor Zionism. There's cultural Zionism. There's spiritual Zionism. There's religious Zionism.
Right,
there are all different types of Zionism that are not political in nature. And I want to encourage people to think about Zionism not exclusively through that political prism.
Right. Like the focus on Israeli companies and their betterment. I think like economic Zionism is something that's huge, especially like you see after like serving the nation, a lot of companies in Israel give preference to soldiers who have fought, not who have abstained from fighting. And that fighting is something that's regularized in the economy, so it's something that is not necessarily a setback or an obstacle. And I think that would be like, in my opinion, an example of Zionism aside from the political sphere.
Very cool.